Hello. Last Thursday, Linkin Park's Chester Bennington committed suicide. So we're going to talk about male suicide, isolation, suicide in general, mental health and addiction in this episode of The Trews.
Chester Bennington's raw and heartfelt vocals were a talent often fueled by anguish, something he was always open about. Bennington never shied away from talking about having depression and a long history of drug and alcohol abuse, which he said started when he was just 11 years old after his parents divorced.
It's very curious that all of the identifiable landmarks are present. Trauma in childhood of abuse and the divorce of parents, addiction, and what's also interesting is that he spoke openly about depression, because I suppose one of the things we think is, if you're having a conversation about it, if you're open about it, you will be exempted. It won't happen to you. There's been a 40% rise in midlife suicide rates since 2008, so this is something that's on the rise. 80% of the suicides are men. 4 out of 10 men have considered suicide. Interesting too, that a lot of people that commit suicide or have suicidal thoughts don't want death, they want life to change. So what I suppose it makes me feel, because I'm, like God, when I think about it, all of the things that Chester Bennington's talking about, addiction, divorce of parents, child abuse, I've experienced all of those things, and I do also publicly talk about mental health and depression. So it makes me feel, and I'm the right age to be right in the middle of this situation. I suppose we are aware, aren't we, about how vulnerable adolescents are to suicide, and of course there is no particular demographic whose suicide is more sad or more tragic, but it's interesting when a pattern, phenomena or trend seems to emerge. Many are saying that both of these recent suicides point to the idea of disillusionment, dissatisfaction, that is more pronounced in the case of famous and successful men, but is probably something that all men this age are starting to experience as we all start to feel like, oh, well, that didn't work then. Becoming successful or not coming, if you become successful, you recognise it doesn't work for you. And then if you aren't successful, then you feel emasculated and unimportant and powerless and castrated. And what I would say is that this is obviously a psychological and mental health issue that's as a result of the social conditions that we live in. I heard recently, if we adjust to a poorly adjusted society, what are we adjusting to? What do we become? If we live in a society that tells us that we have to be these types of individuals and live these types of lives and have access to these type of commodities and have this type of status, and we take on board that, what are we going to become? We've lost the ability to have a collective identity, to commune honestly and open with one another, to speak openly about our frailties, our vulnerabilities, our sadness and our pain. And we have not only that, we think that these tensions and distresses can be alleviated through the acquisition of external phenomena. My belief is that addiction is a condition that affects us all, that we are all on the spectrum. We are all using some external element to make ourselves feel better. And I think, therefore, that the model that I use to one day at a time keep my addiction at bay would work for less obvious forms of addiction. 1, admitting that there's a problem. 2, believing that it's possible for things to be better. And 3, asking for and accepting help. These first 3 steps, I think, are vital. These first 3 steps regularly, continually, constantly worked, I think can make a difference. There's an organisation called CALM, Campaign Against Living Miserably. They work specifically with men. They provide a helpline, guidance, and they do events, comedy nights, sports events and gigs. This seems like a good way to go about it. It's interesting that what they're acknowledging is that people are living miserably. People are unhappy. God, you see it everywhere, don't you? Like, how many of you watching this now thinking, this is how I feel. I'm unhappy with my life. My life didn't work out how I wanted it. I don't feel like I think I should feel. But that idea that of having a concept, an image of how you should feel is, I believe, part of the problem, because how we feel is how we feel, and that's what we have to come to terms with. And the belief that we can change the way we feel, that we can improve, is surely at least one tool in the fight against suicide. If you have hope, you are not going to commit suicide. I suppose suicide is the end of hope, isn't it? It's like, well, I feel this way, it's not going to get better, ta-da. Whether it's David Foster Wallace or Chris Cornell or Chester Bennington or people that are not in the public eye. Of course, it's like, it spawns these kind of videos and this kind of conversation when it happens in public because there's a story to hang it on. But I've spent my whole life around depressed people. I'm not suggesting, I'm hoping I'm not causing it, but like because I'm a drug addict in recovery, because I feel like I had mental health issues when I was a younger man, all of which have been, I believe, dealt with through the methods and techniques and advice and counsel that I get through abstinence-based, in my case, 12-step recovery. I think that this technique, this methodology will work for anybody, perhaps in conjunction with other forms of therapy. I certainly wouldn't say exclusively. Anybody who wants to use it.
Bennington's death comes just a week before Linkin Park was set to kick off the North American leg of their world tour supporting their album, One More Light. Bennington was married and is survived by 6 children. Our thoughts are with his family, bandmates, and fans.
When someone has a family, you think, wow, whatever it was he was feeling, it was more powerful than the feelings of obligation that we have to our family and loved ones. Interesting that he was about to go on tour. It seems to me that, who knows, like any speculation is somewhat moot, but I think what's interesting about it is what it says about men, what it says about our ability to communicate, what it says about the inability and ineffectiveness of success of dealing with mental illness, and that if we don't have new ways of communicating honestly and openly about the way we feel in the world, and the inability of the social systems we've set up to deal with being human, unless we make some real fundamental changes, that there'll be more of this alongside all of the other destructive phenomena that we associate with late capitalism. Alienation, of course, which Marx described articulately, that we feel worthless, whether we're cogs in an industrial machine or leading lights in the rock industry. Alienation is something that people are feeling. Worthlessness, despair, loneliness. And what I think is particularly tragic about this is it's preventable. Like many of the demons that stalk us in our current day, whether it's ecological meltdown or economic inequality, these things are preventable. Certainly, Chester Bennington's death was, I believe, preventable because I think with communication, love and openness, less people will commit suicide. I know I've had thoughts of suicide before, and the reason that I've not carried it out is because I've always been fortunate enough to have access to other people who said, yeah, I felt like that, don't do anything dramatic about it, there are other ways, this is temporary, this will go by. So please use the resources that are available to you, like Calm, information accessible here, or talk to one another openly. True News, thank you.